Good morning. I'm getting this set up and we'll start on time at 9 o'clock. Thanks for being here early. Good morning, everybody. Still 6 minutes till we get started. Thank you for being early. I'm just going to give people some time to get in here. I imagine some people haven't used Zoom before, and so we want to make sure everybody has a chance to get in. Let's see. Vanessa or Yolanda, can you just raise your hand to show me that you can hear me? Ah, thank you. Thank you, Yolanda. Okay, very good. I'm going to mute myself again. Thanks, Vanessa. Good morning, everybody. Still people coming in here, so I'm going to wait. This is Derek. I'm going to wait for a few more minutes until I get started. I figure maybe one or two people haven't used Zoom before, and I want to make sure they just have time to get that little app loaded on their computer and jump in here. So thank you for being early, and we'll get started very shortly. All right. Well, it looks like everybody that was trying to get in is in for the moment. I'll keep admitting people as they show up here. And thank you all for joining us this morning. This is I hope everybody's doing well out there. This is really a weird time and a weird circumstance, and I'm sitting here in my dining room at the dining room table doing this, and everybody I'm sure is similarly in other places at home, or I don't know if anybody's actually in the office, but anyway, we're doing our best. I hope we're keeping up with your needs, and if not, please do let us know. So this is the first time that we've used Zoom for this. Usually we use GoToMeeting, and if you've attended our webinars in the past, you know that we sometimes have some technical glitches. Hopefully I've got this figured out. We're gonna see here. But we've got about 32 of you. Supposedly on Zoom, I can have up to 100 people. So I'm hopeful that we can get this run without any big glitches. So I'm just going to get it started. What I've done here is I've built a deck in PowerPoint. I used another technology called Snagit, which you might know about, to record some parts of this. In between those parts, we will pause to take questions. And so what I'll ask you to do, if you have a question, is to raise your hand. Then I'll unmute you, and then you can ask your question. And then if I can't answer it, then I'll ask Wendy, Jim, Vanessa, or Yolanda to chime in. And so we have, just so you all know, we have hired a replacement for my position that I left when I moved to the supervisor job, and her name is Yolanda Park. She's here with us online today, and she's been with us for about 2 weeks now, and so she's getting up to speed and learning her way around this stuff, and she's going to be terrific. So some of the course will be assigned to her eventually. For now, you still have your assigned grant manager that you've had for a while, but Yolanda will be stepping in and helping us with that as well. So welcome, Yolanda, and I hope you'll I'm sure you'll all enjoy working with her. She's a really good person. So here we go. I'm going to start this, and we will see how this works. So again, at the end of each little section, I'm going to pause, and we will take questions at that point. Okay? Uh-oh, rats. That's not what I wanted to do. First hiccup. Okay. All right. So here we go. So this webinar is going to focus on 3 key elements of your RLC 35 grant application: the grants management system, how to get around that and what you have to do in there, the grant project summary, and the budget workbook. Those are the key elements. There are other elements to it as well, but that's what we're focusing on here this morning. So.
Okay, so before you get into the grants management system, you must have a WebPass, and this is on our home page, CalRecycle's home page, and this is the WebPass page. So you'll see up here, secure calrecycle.ca.gov/WebPass. So you need to go here. If you don't have a WebPass, or if you had one, and you forgot your password, you can change your password here. You can resend an activation email. You can create a new one, and you can manage your WebPass account. So if you don't have one yet and you need one to get into GMS, then you should click on Create Account, and it's pretty straightforward. This is what you're going to put in here in order to get an account. And once you finish entering this stuff up here and you prove you're not a robot, then you click Create My Account and just follow the directions. So very important, everybody who is going to be listed as a contact in GMS for your grant needs to have their own unique WebPass. Do not share WebPasses. Very important for security purposes that everybody have their own WebPass. So again, this is where you find it. Start on this page, and the WebPass home and click on create account, and then just follow directions and you'll be in. That's it. Pretty simple.
Okay, so that's the first step. You've got to have a WebPass in order to access the grants management system, which is what the next video is about. So I'm just taking a pause here, like I said I would. Any questions about the grants or the WebPass? They're really simple, they're free, and everybody needs to have their own in order to access the grants management system. We really don't want anybody sharing web passes. Everybody needs to have their own, and it's important for you because anybody who has a web pass and who has access to your grant can make changes in the grants management system to that grant. So it's really important because they could submit invoices, they could do all kinds of damage in there if they didn't know what they were doing, or if, heaven forbid, they were malicious. So it's important that everybody uses their own distinct login. Okay, this one is about the grants management system.
Okay, welcome to the grants management system. This is the home page. This is what you will see when you log into the system, and this is where you're going to begin working on your grant application. So we are on the My Grants page, and at the top you'll see My Active Grant Applications. So you don't have to apply for a grant, you don't have to create your own from scratch. We've created some applications for each of you in here, and you can see it's unsubmitted because it's not finished yet. So we're just going to click on application, and that's going to take us into the system, and this is where you'll do all your work in your application ready to go. So you can see that I'm emulating. That means that I'm signed in, not as Marilee Eckert, but to see what Marilee Eckert from San Francisco can see. So this is the San Francisco application, and so there are different tabs that you're going to work in here: summary, applicant, participant, detail, contacts, budget, and documents. And you're going to do something on each of these. Some of them is really quick and some take a little bit more work. On this summary page here on the left side, you're going to see some information. So you're unsubmitted, and there's no date, of course. And this is the program you are applying to, and this is your grant ID for your particular grant. There are resource links here. There's the grant programs homepage, which is at CalRecycle. This is the resolution and letter examples. So if you need a sample board resolution or letter of commitment, which is one of the requirements over here, then there are examples for you here. Also, resource documents that are important if you plan to submit in advance. There's an advanced guidance document. There's the application guidelines and instructions. This tells you everything you need to know about applying for this grant. Templates, all instructions for various templates. You don't really need that for your application, but that'll be useful to you later as you manage the grant. Procedures and requirements and terms and conditions. These are very important legal documents that are part of the grant agreement. So here you'll find your budget workbook that you need to complete and turn in, and the template for your grant project summary is here as well. Now these are part of your application, and so you will definitely need to you'll definitely need that. So another important, so here on this side you've got the application checklist. These little check marks, if they're red, that means you haven't done it yet. If it's green, that means it's completed. Required documents, application certification, which you're going to print after you finish your application here. You'll print it, sign it, scan it, and upload it in the Documents tab, which we'll look at in a little bit. You need to turn in your budget. That's a required document, and remember that's here, your budget workbook. Cost allocation plan, that is from your accounting department. Grant project summary, again, the template is here for download, and a resolution letter of commitment, which again, if you need an example of what that should look like, you have samples here. This is optional if you if you are requesting an advance, then you will need to do an advance payment justification. And again, here, advance guidance is where you'll find all the details on what you have to do to submit for an advance. Also, letter of designation, that's if the primary signatory for your organization has permission from the board to delegate their signature authority to somebody else, then they have to submit a letter saying, I grant permission to Jane Doe to sign on my behalf. But the board resolution that gives the key or the main signatory permission to be the signatory also has to give them permission to delegate that authority. So it's not automatic. Application. So this is another tab. So here it should show your core name. If you click on that, you'll see there's some information back here. This is your federal tax ID. Double check that, make sure that that's correctly entered, and that's pretty much it. So you're the lead participant, and so there's not a whole lot to do on that tab. We go to the Detail tab. You're going to edit this, and you're going to enter the total amount of the grant requested here, and you're going to identify your Assembly and Senate districts, and there's a link here that will help you find those if you don't know how to find those. So make sure your core name is correct, make sure your address is correct. This is the address that should be on your payee data record. And if you've moved since last year, this may be an old address. And if it is, then you need to change that. And if you haven't submitted a new payee data record, then talk to your grant manager and get one of those forms and get it submitted. Because the State Controller's Office requires that the address on your payment requests matches what's in their accounting system. And what's in their accounting system comes from the payee data record. So everything's got to align or they won't write you a check. So it's really important. So we're just going to cancel out of that because I didn't change anything, and then go to Contacts. So some of you have some cleanup to do in Contacts. I noticed when I was activating the grant applications before we notified you they were available, that a lot of you have old contacts in there, people who've left your organization. So you need to delete those out, and you need to add in anybody else who you want to have access to the grants management system. Remember, it is important to remember that if you give access to the grant in this system, that whoever has access can make changes. So you want to limit access to those people who absolutely need it. And everybody that needs access must have a pass, a web pass. And I'll show you where to get a web pass in a little bit, but you must, they must have their own web pass in order to be in here, and that's triggered by their email. So make sure the names are correct, spelled correctly. Make sure that the organization that they work for is proper. If it's not your core, it should list who it is, their title, phone number, email, and then here it's going to show on this page what you select their detail, and I'll show you that in a minute. But if they are the primary contact, the secondary contact, if they are an authorized person to sign documents, that will show here. And then if they're a consultant to your organization, that will also show here. So let's look back here, because this is where you make changes. So each person who's listed as a contact has one of these pages behind their name, and this is where you populate all of the important information. So this is a really important piece, allow access. If that isn't checked, then when the person logs in on that very first page on My Grants where we started, they won't see this grant application there at all. That section will be blank. And we get a lot of questions every year from people who are just getting entered into the system, and the primary contact hasn't gone in and allowed them to have access. So whoever the primary contact is, whoever is checked here as a primary, they are the person who has permission to give access. So they need to log in, go to that person's name, click on it, get to this page, and then click that little box. Okay, so just make sure everything's correct here. Excuse me. Identify the primary contact, secondary contact, and signature authority, and if they're a consultant. And then that'll populate that front page here. All of these will be checked. All right, so if you need to add a contact, this is the button for doing that. It'll give you a blank page like this. This will be completely blank. You need to put everything in, all the details in. The budget page, this is quite important. You're going to edit this page. You're going to enter the amounts that you're requesting in each of the material funds. These amounts are shown in your budget workbook. So you want to download that from the summary tab, and then you'll be able to see how much you're eligible for, and you'll enter those amounts here and the total up here. Okay, and that's what you got to do there. On the Documents tab, this is where you're going to upload documents. So you're going to, when you want to upload a document, you're going to click Add Document, and then you'll put in the title of the document. Please be as descriptive and specific as possible. If it's your budget workbook, you should say SFCC RLC 35 Budget Workbook. So be specific and detailed on those titles. So over here, it shows you the required documents, application certification, which I showed you on this summary page. I'll reinforce that in just a minute. The budget workbook, the cost allocation plan, grant project summary, and all of these need to be uploaded here. And if they're not, if these don't turn green, then you won't be able to submit your application. These are optional: advanced payment justification and letter of designation. These are optional documents and would not prevent you from submitting your application, but they might prevent you from submitting an advance request if you don't submit it with your application. So it's quite important. Letter of designation can be submitted at any time through the cycle as appropriate and needed. Okay, so I'm going to cancel this because I'm not uploading a document, but those will populate here and it'll show you all of your documents that you've uploaded as you do that. So after you've got all these green, and these green if you want them green, you've added all these documents, then you go back to your summary tab, and now you can print the application certification, sign it, scan it, and then go back to documents and upload it. Okay, and this final one will turn green for you. And then from the summary tab is where you submit your application. So here's the button, and you see it's gray. If I click on it now, it won't do anything because it's grayed out. So this will light up when all of these are green. Okay, when all of these required things are green, then you can submit your application. Very important step. So let's see. Last thing I wanted to show you again was just that to remind you about the resource documents. These are 2 required application documents, budget workbook and the project grant project summary. And after you submit, then you're good to go. So as long as these are all green and this lights up, you can submit your grant, and your application will be received at CalRecycle, and your grant manager will get a notification that you've done that. Very important date here. The due date is 4/30/2020. So be sure that you complete and submit this grant by April 30th. Our exec takes it in view of late applications. So please make sure you get it done on time. If you need help, then in the guidelines and instructions, there is the name of a person named Joe Pacheco. He is our GMS contact in fiscal process oversight. He's an expert on this system, and he can help you if you're having technical problems with the system. If you need program help, then you need to contact your grant manager. But on the technical side of GMS, something's just not working for you, contact Joe. There's a phone number in here in the G's and I's, and email, and you can contact him there. All right, good luck.
Okay, so I'm pausing here for questions in case anyone has questions on that rather long, that's the longest video of the day. If you have any questions about GMS, please raise your hand. I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. And I'll just give a minute for that to happen. And in the meantime, I will move this on. Got to make sure I'm in the right place because I've got another secondary little quickie video on the grants management system. Yeah, okay, so that was it there. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm gonna move on with this one. It's another little quick video, just supplementary. Oop, rats. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so there's one more thing I forgot to mention, and it's really important. So if you go back to the Documents tab, when you want to add a document to satisfy one of these required documents, then I already told you about entering a title. You need to also select the document type from this drop-down list. Okay, so maybe it's a letter of designation, maybe it's the application certification, but you're going to select that from the drop-down, select the document dates, which would be today, whatever day you're uploading it. You're going to choose the file, and it's going to open a window that shows all of your computer files, so you can find it and select it, and then you're going to save it. Okay, then when you've done that, over here your application certification would then turn green. Okay, so again, you won't be able to submit your application until you have uploaded each of the required documents in here. That's this list. These are other supporting documents. They are also listed here, but they're not required. Those are optional. Okay, that's it. Okay, I see we do have one question. So Aaliyah, I am going to unmute you, and hopefully everybody can hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. I hope everyone else can. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, good morning. I had a couple of questions about the GPS template.
Sure.
So on think last week Jim Madden sent out a template and said that's the latest version, we should use that one. And there are a couple of discrepancies between that one and the template in GMS. And so the one that he sent didn't have like the footer at the bottom with the name of the core. And there are some areas where, like in the first two objectives for the key activities, there weren't comment sections. So we added those in. I'm wondering if that's okay, or if we should leave it exactly as Jim sent it, but there were a few discrepancies in that one and the one in GMS.
Yeah, that's my fault, because I think I grabbed the wrong copy to upload to GMS, but feel free to modify it as you see fit. It's really, in the end, it's just a template to get you started, and it's your document. The next section, I'm actually going to go through that document. So see if it makes sense after I've run this next video, and then raise your hand again if you have any other questions about it.
Okay, but if there are some discrepancies where we see, like, you know, your version that you show on here has the footer and everything, we can just go ahead and modify the document that Jim sent?
Yes, sure.
Okay, and then also
Yep.
On the EPPP policy, I know that if we don't have one by the time we submit, we can upload it. There's like a secondary date that we have to upload it before a grant agreement is executed. Do we know what that secondary date is at this time?
No, we don't set a secondary date, but you probably won't see grant agreements till the very beginning of, well, either the very end of June or the very beginning of July. Depends on how quickly we get through the review process and the editing process with all the grantees. But yeah, that's there's no set date, no set secondary due date.
So as long as we have it, the policy before the grant agreements are issued.
Yes, yes. And you know, if we understand that if it's got to be board approved and all of that, and you guys are in this weird situation where maybe your board isn't meeting until later in the summer, then work with your grant manager on that. And as long as you've got a draft policy in place and it's scheduled to go to a board meeting later in the summer, if that's the first time your board is going to get together again, we'll work with you on that. Don't think we're going to disqualify your application because of that.
And then if we have a draft, can we send it to our grant manager just to look at it to make sure it includes everything, all the requirements?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then final question, I swear. For right now, for our course, internships aren't really viable, and so for that section in the GPS, when we completed it, we just noted that because of the pandemic that we're experiencing, we don't anticipate that internships will be viable for the duration of our grant. So is that okay, and that we didn't list any QAs for that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. If it's actually, if it's not something you're planning to do, if you want to leave it in there as a placeholder, as something you may do if the situation turns around, that's fine. But if it's for some cores, they may just not do internships at all, and they could just delete that section right out of the template. Doesn't have to be in there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Derek.
Okay, thanks, Aaliyah. Okay, let me see, just double checking to make sure. I've got to run down the list to make sure no other questions pop up. Okay, we're good. Okay, so we'll move on to the next section. And this is all about your grant project summary. Okay, this little video is about your grant project summary. This is one of your key application documents, and this is where you're going to describe your project to us in narrative form. So this document has been revised a bit and reorganized, and Jim did a nice job for us on getting this put together in a clearer format. So first thing to know is that your objectives have to be written in a SMART way. So SMART is described here, And if your objectives are not written in a smart way, then we will be asking you to revise those. So make sure that the elements that are listed and described here are included in each one of your objectives. So each one has to be clear about what's going to be changed or improved, has to be measurable, it has to be achievable, it has to be realistic, and it has to be time bound. So there has to be a time period within which you're going to achieve that objective. Now, there's a sample objective here for you to look at. This contains all of these elements. Each of your objectives is going to be supported. Sorry guys, I had to admit somebody, so I might have to restart that video. Sorry about that. Somebody was in the waiting room and I had to admit them. Okay, this little video is about your grant project summary. This is one of your key application documents, and this is where you're going to describe your project to us in narrative form. So this document has been revised a bit and reorganized, and Jim did a nice job for us on getting this put together in a clearer format. So first thing to know is that your objectives have to be written in a smart way. So SMART is described here. And if your objectives are not written in a smart way, then we will be asking you to revise those. So make sure that the elements that are listed and described here are included in each one of your objectives. So each one has to be clear about what's going to be changed or improved, has to be measurable, it has to be achievable, it has to be realistic, and it has to be time bound. So there has to be a time period within which you're going to achieve that objective. Now, there's a sample objective here for you to look at. This contains all of these elements. Each of your objectives is going to be supported by a series of key activities. These activities would logically lead you to achievement of your objective. The key activities have their own timelines. That's because an activity might not be more than a month long, but it might be supportive of the objective. If your objective were to collect and recycle 6,000 tires, then one key activity might be to collect part of that 6,000, but not the whole 6,000. So you would have a series of key activities that would be descriptive of ways that you're going to collect 6,000 tires. So there will be timelines assigned to those. There's a place for you to put in the actual date completed. You'll fill those in when you are doing your quarterly reports. And then there are outcomes that are related to what that key activity is. So if it's a key activity to do a monthly drop-off, the outcomes would be related to that. So maybe you get a TPID for the site, you sign a MOU with a partner to use their facility, you set up, you hold the event. So those are the kinds of outcomes we're looking for. So there are quarterly status comments associated with each of the key activities, and those are filled in as you finish each quarter of the grant and you prepare your quarterly progress report. So there's a bunch of instructions you can read. I won't go through those here. There's an example of a completed table, the way that we want to see it completed. And then there are a series of tables for you to complete or that are pre-filled for you. The evaluation objectives are written for you. That's because CalRecycle wants you to do these two objectives related to evaluating your project, and everything you need to do is describe the key activities, timelines, and outcomes. So then you come to your blank tables, and on these tables, some of them have materials that you're going to be addressing in the objective. Sometimes you're not going to be addressing all materials under the same objective, but some of them you are. These are common objectives up here. Material specific objectives are a little bit later. So education, outreach, and marketing, you may write common objectives for those. Just tick off which of these you're going to do. Now, something like dock walking would be specific only to used oil, but we want you to say what material funds you're going to be doing these education, outreach, and marketing activities. So you're going to fill those in. You'll notice that these tables are broken up this year. They used to all run together, but for accessibility purposes, they need to be separate. So don't join them up. Leave them separate. These tables have alt text behind them, and they're accessible to people with disabilities. So leave them as we've done them. Partnerships and collaborations, again, check off which of the materials you have partnerships and collaborations with that you're going to be addressing here. So you're going to put in your objective, and then you're going to write key activities. Now, you're not limited to the number of objectives. If you need to create additional ones, just copy and paste this whole section. So you would have objective, key activity, and quarterly status comments table all copied, and then you just go to the bottom and you'd paste it at the bottom before the next section, and then just change the objective number to whatever's appropriate. So we're not limiting you to the objectives, we just given you a set number in each section. So you can add to that if you like. We have a section for internships. If you have internships, we want, and you're paying for them out of the grant, we want to see an objective for those and activities and all of that around those. Common objectives, these are general activities that might apply to more than one material. So if you were buying a vehicle, for instance, that was going to be used in waste, tires, and e-waste collection, you would do that under a common objective. The reason we did this is so that you don't have to repeat yourself in e-waste and waste tires with the same objective, so, or the same activity. So if your objective is, if you're going to buy a vehicle, you can put it here if it's going to cover more than one material. One important point about the grant project summary is one of the review point criteria, I guess, that we use to look at these in reviewing your grant application is we look at all of your key activities and we say, well, is that going to cost money? And if it is, then we expect to be able to cross-reference that to your budget. So be sure that whatever you put in here that costs money, if you put a vehicle in here, be sure you put it in your budget. If it's not paid for by the grant, then it really doesn't need to be in your grant project summary. So material fund activities are listed here. There's one each for beverage container, waste tires, used oil. They all look the same. They require you to give us a SMART objective and then a set of key activities that logically lead to achievement of the objective. So that's it. That's your grant project summary. One other point about this is if you want your grant manager to review your grant project summary before you submit it, you may send it a draft to them. They send it in a Word document so they can mark it up and send it back to you. It doesn't even have to be complete. If you want to send in a section where you've gotten started just to make sure you're on the right track, you can do that too. But we're here to help and we want you to be successful. So use our our expertise to help you fine-tune your grant project summary before you submit it if needed. That's it. Thank you. All right, so I see one hand up, so I'm going to unmute Sean here.
Hey, Derek, how you doing? Thanks a lot.
I'm well, Sean. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, so I do have a question in regards to the goals that we outlined in the grant. And this is probably going back to, you know, since I've been with the Corps for a while and went through the last recession, knowing how touchy recycling got during the last recession. So will we have the ability, if we find out that, you know, as we're going through the grant and the recession does hit, and maybe we're not hitting our goals because, you know, the public is recycling as well to try to get income, will we have the flexibility to go back and revisit our goals?
We can make revisions to the GPS, but another way to address that is in your quarterly status comments. That's where I would do it rather than try to revise the document. I would just bring that up in your quarterly status comments. If you have a beverage container recycling center and it's, you know, the production is way down because the public's just not going out, I would just comment on that and identify the metrics in the quarterly status comments.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, sure thing. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Sean. And let me see if anybody else has got a question. There's one, I have a little addendum video for Grant Project Summary 2. So that'll be next. And here it is. There's a couple of other points that I need to address, and one of them is this, the fiscal year end summary. So you will be writing one of these for each objective, not each key activity. So you'll notice that this is placed at the end of the section under Objective 1. This is our example that's in the GPS for you to look at. And so there's an objective, there are 2 key activities for that objective, and you can see that this report is finished through Q4. So at the end of the fiscal year, Q4, you are going to write a fiscal year end summary for the objective that is a summary of your achievement of that objective. So you can see in here that it's to be measured by the number of accounts created, collection accounts, and by the tonnage increase of 5%. So this is what you're going to talk about in your fiscal year end summary. Your quarterly status comments inform your description here, because these activities are what should be leading you to achievement of this objective. So how you did quarter by quarter, read those back through, and then write a summary for each objective. So you'll write one of these for each objective that you've put in at the end of the fiscal year. The other thing that came up or has been questioned a couple times by Corps out there is the baseline. So when you're writing objectives, this says increase tonnage by 5% in fiscal year 18-19. Well, of course, that's calculated on a baseline of the previous fiscal year. And so people are asking us, well, what do we do with the baseline when we've had such a disruption in our activities this year? And so my best answer at this point is that we don't know what next year is going to bring with this virus, and we don't know how much disruption in your activities there will be next year. So the best thing you can do is use the baseline for 1920, and then we will just measure against that. So just use that as your baseline, assuming the same level of disruption on and off, because we don't know about the resurgence of this virus going forward. So the best we can do is measure by the previous year, and if it goes up 100%, then good for you. but I would just calculate your objective increases based on the baseline of 1920. We simply don't know what's to come in the coming year. All right, thanks. Okay, we have a question, Kyle. So I'm going to unmute you, Kyle. Good morning, Kyle.
Hey, good morning. How's it going?
All right, how are you?
Good, good. So on that note, for objectives that we expect to decrease because of the virus, what should the language around that be in the GPS?
Well, I wouldn't put it in there as a negative. I would just put in the actual amount that you're expecting. So,
Okay.
you know, this example shows a percentage increase, which is fine in normal circumstances, but in this circumstance, you might just say, you know, we anticipate 100 tons of beverage container compared to, you know, which may be less than the year before, but that's just the way it is. So,
Yeah. Do we need to
just
state why, like specifically say because of COVID, or just leave it at that?
I don't think so. Yeah, I really don't think so. I think, you know, you may want to bring that up in your year-end summary or your fiscal year-end summary, just to preface the comments with, hey, you know, we had a good year, all things considered, and it's still below the baseline of the previous year, but this is why.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? I just gotta run down the list of you guys here. And I got, okay, so on to the budget workbook. And so this is Wendy's fancy schmancy Excel workbook. And I think she sent a revision out to everybody yesterday because there was one out of the 20,000 formulas that she found was bad. And so I think her batting average is pretty excellent, but as we find errors going forward after you've submitted these, we won't be sending you a blank and asking you to re-enter your information. When we find, just so you know, when we find errors in formulas that come up as we use this through the cycle, Wendy repairs those when you send those in with your invoices. So she'll repair it and send it back to you as a repaired version with all of your data in there. So that I just want to reassure you that if you haven't been through this process before and you got a new one yesterday and you're thinking, well, now I got to copy and paste everything back in to this new one, that isn't what happens during the cycle. So anyway, I'm going to proceed with this video.
Another key document for you to submit annually is your budget workbook. So in here, you're going to build your budget detail, and we'll show you that tab in just a minute. The first thing to do on your budget workbook is to select your core. And so you can see right now, Greater Valley is selected. However, you can select any core that you want to select your core, of course, and you'll want to mark next whether or not you are requesting an advance. And if you're not, then this will go to zeros. And if you are, then the advance amounts that you need to request, if you're requesting the full 25%, are listed here. So these are the amounts that you will enter into GMS. You don't need to enter these into GMS. You'll put those into your advance request. So there's two places you're going to enter numbers. You're going to enter the total grant amount award that you're requesting, and then you're also down below in GMS you're going to enter the material fund amounts as well. So that's where you get that. There's a few instructions on how to use this here and on descriptions. So on this tab you choose your core. On the application budget tab, you're going to enter your budget for each material type where indicated. So the budget line items are considered part of your budget when you allocate dollars to them. They're not part of your budget if you leave them at zero. So it's important to remember that you are you're restricted to spending money within the approved budget. So if there's a line item later that you need to add, that will need to be approved by your grant manager as a budget modification. So you're going to need to provide descriptions for each budget line item, and we want them to be as descriptive as possible. So an example is core member wages. We want to know how you calculated that. So if you're saying 50 core members per month and they're earning $12 per hour rather, and they're working 8 hours per day and they're working 20 hours per month times 20 months, that would be your total in core member wage cost. And that is what we would want to see in your description. So how did you come up with $1,152,000? This is wrong. Let me add a zero. Okay, there we go. Now it's right. So very important to put a complete description, and if you don't have complete descriptions, your grant manager will be asking you to revise your budget and put those in. Remember to add any out-of-state travel costs that you already know about when you're building your budget. So I know most cores go to Washington, D.C. for the National Core Conference. That should go into your budget and should be described as a trip to Washington, D.C. for 2 core members and 2 staff members, or whatever it is you're planning to do there. And this will save you requesting approval later for out-of-state travel, because do remember that all out-of-state travel needs to be pre-approved. So putting it into your budget automatically pre-approves it, because this becomes part of your grant agreement, and CalRecycle has approved that. So cells that turn red means something's wrong. So review any cells that turn red or any red font. Very important. Remember the parameters for indirect and benefits and taxes. Benefits and taxes must not be more than 35% of wages, excluding workers' comp, and indirect must not be more than 20% of the grant amount. Okay? So let's look at the application budget. This is where you'll actually put in your budget. And you can see that the totals that you have to spend are pre-entered here. Now this one, this example has some amounts in it already, and unfortunately there's no descriptions, but this is where you will write your descriptions that we discussed on the previous page. So be sure that if you put in beverage container equipment, that you describe what that equipment is, and same for e-waste equipment and everything else you put in here. Everything you fund must have a description, and it must be detailed enough so that we can understand what it is you're proposing to pay for. So very, very important. Your grant will total down here, or your budget, rather, your budget line items will total at the bottom. And if this goes over, so let's say I put in $1 million in insurance. You see what happened? It turned red. So remember on the previous page we said red is bad, so that means you're over budget in beverage containers. So I'm just going to take that out again, and it goes back to black and white. So again, watch for red. If you see red down here, that means you're over budget. You need to adjust your line item amounts. Now, of course, there will be more tabs on your budget workbook. They're hidden right now. They're in here. They're just hidden. But the budget workbook that you'll be receiving from Wendy will have all the normal tabs. It looks pretty much exactly like last year, and it'll work the same way. So that's how you do your budget. So this, once you have this done and your line items and your descriptions filled in, then you're going to save this and then upload it to GMS as one of the required application documents. And that's your budget workbook.
Okay, so that's your budget workbook. So I'm just looking down the list to see if there's any questions about that, about budgets. Looks like everybody's on track or asleep by now, or chasing the dog around the house. I'm gonna move on to
Another key
questions and answers. So that is the end of our little pre-recorded videos for the application. And so I just want to remind you that for GMS technical assistance, Joe Pacheco is the guy. He is our contact in fiscal process oversight, and he is the one that works with GMS all the time, and he can help with technical problems if the system isn't working for you. Grant project summary assistance, please contact your grant manager directly on that. And again, I encourage you, if you want to send a draft of part of what you're working on, just to make sure you're on track, especially if you haven't done it before, it's not a bad idea to ask your grant manager to just have a look. And please do send that in your in Word format. And also, I would also ask that when you upload it to GMS, your GPS, please upload that in Word format too, not in PDF. We can give you track changes back, and that's a lot more beneficial than looks like I got a bunch of chat messages. You guys are smarter at this than I am. I'm going to open that up in a minute. But anyway, just to close that thought, just please upload your GPS in Word format to GMS when you do that. And then your grant manager will be able to work with you better on that. Budget workbook assistance should be with Wendy. Now, I got a bunch of stuff here. Let's see. Okay, so wow, look at that. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I didn't know. Yeah, it's my first time doing a chat, a Zoom thing too. So let's see. Okay, so Laura could hear me. That's good. Diana couldn't hear anything. I hope she got that. She didn't leave, so I hope she's got that. Oh, she can hear now. Good. Aaliyah, we talked. Let's see. Yolanda. Oh, okay. Oh, Kim was stuck in the waiting room. I did let Kim in after the GPS, so that's good. And it looks like most of it, my staff was helping me out. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Let's see. I'm just gonna unmute. Let's see. Just unmute Vanessa, and I'm gonna unmute Wendy Box, Yolanda, and where's Jim? There's Jim. I'm gonna unmute Jim. So everybody can, well, yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to unmute everybody so they can say hi to the group before we close out here. Vanessa, Jim, Yolanda, you guys just want to say hi to the group?
Good morning.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone. This is Yolanda Park, or Yoli for short, and I look forward to working with everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, well, I'm going to unmute everybody now, and everybody can just cheer or boo or hiss or whatever you want to do. So anyway, just thanks to all of you guys for tuning in. Hope you're all doing well. All right. All right, we're going to close this down. Thanks, everybody. I think somebody asked if it was going to be available. I'll try to get a recording of this put together somehow and send it out. So have a good day. Let us know if we can help you on your applications. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks,
Have a great day.
All right, guys. See ya. Bye.